Alright, welcome back to another containerization crash course where PKMNRED is taking over my entire life. I have logged almost 30 hours into Fire Red since the last time I did one of these. It's been a lot. I've almost found God, Moltres. But I did also come back to this project because I want to get this running. And let's see if I have the files now. It looks like we've got something, so let's go ahead and ls my new PKMNRED directory, and I've got a bunch of stuff in there, so this is good. Full disclosure, this still doesn't work. I'm not a developer. I'll show you guys why it doesn't work in a bit, but there is some pretty cool Docker-ness that happens with this. One of the main things that you run into when troubleshooting Docker containers and the apps running in them is where to look for that information. And so just going through and running a couple of commands can really help out on this. Before we get into that, though, we have to cd into PKMNRED and go ahead and docker build, or no, not build, compose. To get our container up and going. That one might take you a little bit longer if you pull it down, but that's okay. It might take a minute or two or three, but you'll eventually get the build finished, and then you can go ahead and docker compose up, which will create the network, create the container, and start running it. And we've got it hosted on our local address as well as the Docker's IP, whichever one you want to go with that. Not the Docker's IP, the container's IP. So if I just pull up my browser here, we can now go in and localhost 8080. And we'll see that PKMNRED emulator. This looks really cool, right? It looks like you have a tiny little Game Boy in your browser, except it doesn't work. If I click in here, it's supposed to be ZX for AB, enter shift for select start, and if I try and hit any of those, we just get nothing, that's fine, right? That's fine. We're not here to be application developers. We're here to learn more about Docker. So if I go back to that PKMNRED, we'll see there's not a lot going on here, but I'm going to highlight some of the areas you can look to get more information. So I'm going to pull up my other terminal. And if you are failing to load, one of the things that you can do is you can send a docker exec command if you know how to type. What did I name it? PKMNRED? There we go. One, and then ls that app so I can make sure that I have Is that not what I named it? Oh, did Docker make it lowercase? Docker probably made it lowercase. Let's go ahead and let my terminal catch up to all of the keystrokes that I threw in there really quick. This is why I always give my stuff simple names. So let's go ahead and do docker exec. So we're going to execute interactively the command for PKMNRED web emulator 1, and I'm going to list recursively the app directory that we copied over. So this should have all of our files in it, right? So if you're ever having an issue where this is based on this index.html template, so the server pi calls to that. One of the issues that I ran into during build was that it wasn't actually loading correctly, so this wasn't showing up, and I only found that by hopping in here to docker exec. The other thing that you can take a look at if you're running into issues is just the logs of it. So let's go ahead and put in the right name. DBE was my test version, because of course I couldn't get this going on one shot. I'm not that good. So if we take a look, we can see the logs or follow those logs. This is really helpful if you're running it in the background. I know we have these same logs over on the other screen, but it's very nice to see and be able to check. So that is another thing you can do. If you're running into issues, you can use exec to grab commands or files from inside. You can use The other one we just did, logs, and you can also do docker inspect. And I'm going to take a shorter look at inspect because I did a really fancy one earlier. So if you guys take a look, this is a really long inspect command, but all it actually does is grab the IP address. So let's go ahead and get rid of DBE, change it to PKMNRED. And if I run that, it just gives me that container's IP address. And what this can be helpful for is checking to see what's going on in your server. Because now from my host, I can curl, and we're going to do force IPv4, verbose, and I'm not going to look at localhost. I'm going to look at that Docker IP address. So for me, it'll be 172.190.8080. You might get a different one if you're following along, but that just lets us see this here. And if we can actually get that page returned, that's good, right? Up near the top, we'll see our connection information. We requested, got it back, and then it loaded. So those are 3 things that you can do to try and troubleshoot these issues if you're running into any with your builds. I'm going to print out my history so you guys can see exactly how many times I was doing this earlier. So many times. I was having so many issues earlier. But right in here is where I would highlight if you are trying to troubleshoot, you can use exec, logs, and inspect to interact with your containers, even if they're still running either in the background or foreground in another terminal. So the next step would be obviously hopping into the application files to see why we're not able to start the game in here. But that is beyond the scope of today. Maybe we'll look at that next time. Maybe we'll move on from PKMNRED, but probably not. That is all for today's containerization crash course. See y'all later.